Hi, this is Josh Kulp for Daf Shevui. We are learning Masechet Avodah Zarah, Daf Mem Daled. This is a very, very interesting daf, so I really hope you enjoy it. There's a distinct difference between daf Mem Daled Amud Aleph and Mem Daled Amud Bet. The first side of this daf deals with Rabbi Yossi's words in the Mishnah that appears at the bottom of the previous daf concerning the destruction of idols. Rabbi Yossi says that one can also destroy them by grinding them up and casting them into the wind. And we should note that Rabbi Yossi's words seem to be very, very reminiscent of the biblical way of destroying idols, as is quoted throughout the remainder of this part of the sugya, or most of the sugya. He brings up case after case in which biblical figures, most famous of all is Moses with the golden calf, destroy idols by grinding them up and throwing them into water. But the other examples, another famous example is the serpent of Moses that was later destroyed by King Hezekiah because he saw that people were worshiping it. Again, he destroys it in a very, very similar type of way. That seems to be, quite frankly, the biblical mandate for destroying idols. One should destroy them as much as physically possible. How do you destroy stone? You grind it up, smash it up. That seems to be the biblically preferred way. The rabbis in the Mishnah find a kind of obscure problem with destroying idols in that way, and that is that they're going to cause some kind of fertilization. If you grind up stone and cast it to the wind, well, that will de facto cause some kind of enrichment of the ground, and that's a problem. So I think that problem is somewhat, I would say, invented by the rabbis. It didn't seem to bother the Bible, but the rabbis seem to say, look, you think what you're doing is really destroying an idol, but really what you're doing is, in essence, using the idol. Therefore, the best way of destroying an idol is not actually to physically destroy it, but seems to get somebody, a non-Jew, to annul it. Again, the Jew can't annul it. The Jew could throw it into the sea or do something else, but it seems like they prefer annulling the idol over destroying the idol. There is a side discussion which I think is kind of cute that appears on the end of the first Amud about we get there by a series of a bunch of verses. The specially shaped heads of the Davidic family, that they had heads that could fit their massive crown, and therefore they could sort of do a head test of the descendants of David to see if they were appropriate for the throne. I think it's a nice, maybe like sort of semi-mythological fable, kind of like. It reminds me a little of Cinderella, testing somebody to see if they're fit for something by seeing the size, in that case, of her foot, in this case, of their heads. The second side of the page is one of the most fascinating stories, one of the most famous stories in the entire Mishnah, and that is the story of Rabban Gamliel bathing in the bathhouse of Aphrodite, where a philosopher of sorts, a Greek certainly of sorts, accuses him of being hypocritical. You are not supposed to be bathing in a bathhouse with an idolatrous image in it. There has been a lot of scholarly research on this article. It is one of the great descriptions of a rabbi and how he lived in a thoroughly Greek and Roman society in which the bathhouse was, in a sense, a mini temple of sorts. And Rabbi Gamliel doesn't seem to have been bothered all that much by it and goes in and bathes in the bathhouse. There's a scholarly discussion about whether how reflective his answers are of Jewish theology of the time, of Jewish practice, Jewish belief, or rabbinic practice, rabbinic belief, and leads to scholars to discuss the participation of rabbis in Greco-Roman culture. It's really, I would say, a linchpin of that discussion. The Talmud discusses whether Rabban Gamliel's answers were good answers or whether they were sort of deflective kinds of answers just meant to get the difficulty off of him, and has various discussions about the nature of his answers, which is a good Amoraic discussion in and of itself, sort of summarizing when it is prohibited and when it is permitted to participate in a culture that might involve some kind of interaction with an idolatrous place. And this really is the final discussion of this half of our chapter, which talks about rabbis' participation in a culture full of idols, or Jewish participation in a culture full of idols. The next Mishnah is really going to move to what type of idols are prohibited. So it's an interesting sikkum of sorts, a summary of some sorts of the chapter until now. As always, please do use our Daf Shevui Facebook page for comments, questions, and I'm always available for that kind of discussion. I hope you enjoy and keep learning.